All right. Well, welcome to the APM Advanced Philosophy chat with Dr. Andrew Tam in Hong Kong. We tried doing this. We're having some bugs with the software, but I think everything's good. So if you guys start sending some preliminary questions and comments, we'll see that. It should be live. So I was going to ask you how things are going. We've been having quarantine problems. Basically, everyone I know in England and in Europe and America. Is it the same with you?
Yes, in Hong Kong, there is current time, but it's not compulsory. There is no lockdown because actually, the cases in Hong Kong is not that serious. However, Hong Kong closed all borders, so if you enter Hong Kong border from mainland China, from Taiwan, from Macau, you have to stay at home for 14 days or in government accommodation. If you choose government accommodation, you have to pay. That's why I cannot go back to Hong Kong now. Currently, I'm in Macau. And actually, this policy is nothing about hygiene, it's nothing about the disease, it's more about politics because Hong Kong government doesn't want to allow people to leave the border, enter the border or leave the border because probably because they want to prosecute and arrest the protester. That's why they need border control. And they have also a ban on public demonstration. So demonstration now in Hong Kong all are illegal in the name of virus prevention. Well, your mic is mute. Your mic is mute.
Sorry, yeah. No, I was just thinking of virus prevention. That's a very interesting way to manipulate language, because they're saying it's for your security. But this viral, we talk about social viral qualities, and all of a sudden this is, maybe this has to do with like freedom is a virus, right? Like this idea that people want this autonomy. But I do want to ask a bit about Macau also. So is that, how's that going being in Macau?
In Macau is actually quite safe. We don't have any new case for 50 days. So and everything reopens, church reopens, school reopens, business reopens. However, Hong Kong closed the border, which give a serious problem to Macau because Macau relies on tourism and gambling so much, and Hong Kong tourists and Chinese tourists are main source of Macau income. So when the borders are closed, and when the market in Macau reopens, problems occurs because business reopen, but there's no customers. So it will be a tough economy for the following years.
Yeah, that seems kind of like what's going on in a lot of the places here. Do you think? Do you think there's some people that that have insurance for this, or is this kind of a good thing for some of the big companies with the lots of money, and bad for the small businesses? Or
well, actually, in the case of Macau, big enterprise also suffer from this economic downturn because if you talk about big enterprise in Macau, they are gambling industry, hotel industry, and this industry totally relies on tourists. So they suffer from the economic downturn directly. However, for small business shops, stores, they rely more on the local economy. That's better. And the problem is that Macau economy is too how do you say? It's not diversified enough, and there is no informal economy. In the third world or developing world, you have informal economy. People can become hawkers and do some not illegal, semi-legal, I should say, semi-legal business like selling food on the street. Although they are unhygiene, but they can earn a living. But you cannot do this in Macau or in Hong Kong because there are so many regulations. So the economy will not be good for years.
so what's it like being from? So you're from Hong Kong, right? Like,
yes.
So you grew up in Hong Kong after. What year were you born?
I was born in 1991, so I experienced the handover when I was a
Yeah, I was the most gnarly part of your youth. It's like Star Wars Anakin Skywalker. You were like 10 years old when everything went different. And so what was that like? What was that transition from independence out?
That's not really independence. That's just a transition from one colonist to another colonist, from a good colonist to a bad colonist, you can say.
Word.
Yeah, and then actually that transition, I don't remember that transition as a child at all. But when I grew up and see changes in society, I know the problem, because for example, in 2014, when the Chinese government denied democratic reform, there was a big protest called Umbrella Revolution in Hong Kong. So that denial means that one country, two system is a lie, because democratization and the political reform belongs to Hong Kong internal affairs, which should be designed by the Hong Kong people according to the basic law. But at the end, Chinese government reinterpret the basic law, because according to the basic law, they have the rights to reinterpret. So although every law article is written down, they can reinterpret and add something new. And the same story happened against when they proposed the national security law. The national security law is not legislated by Hong Kong government or the Hong Kong Council, but by the People's Congress in Beijing. So they violated basic law, of course. But of course they say, oh, we didn't. Why? Because they will reinterpret the basic law and say, oh, our action is consistent with the basic law. So that's the problem. One country, two systems fails, and we know it clearly. So that's how we experience the changes of Hong Kong society over these decades.
So do you feel like, as you said, that this new owner, like it's done, you said, worse than Britain has for Hong Kong, and when China took over, it lost, or the PRC rather, you know, when the PRC took over Hong Kong, it was a downgrade to your civil liberties and your economic freedom. Is that kind of the idea?
Well, I won't say downgrade, because I'm not old enough to experience the glorious day of British Hong Kong. But if you look at history, well, and actually there's another problem. Sometimes we have exaggerated the good times during British Hong Kong, because there must be also bad times during British Hong Kong. For example, there were several riots during the British Hong Kong, the communist riots in 1960, the Kuomintang supporters riots in the 1950s. So there were bad times in British Hong Kong. However, what we can see nowadays is there are so many promises which are not kept by the Chinese government. And that's the problem. Well, in British Hong Kong period, British Hong Kong government did not make promise easily. They didn't initiate democratization until 1990s. However, they didn't promise for democratization until Christopher Paton become the last governor of Hong Kong. So before Christopher Paton, actually they do not really promise. They have proposed, but they didn't promise to Hong Kongese. It is Beijing government who promised Hong Kongese for democratization, and they changed their promise by reinterpreting the law. And now, even USA and the West judge that there is no more one country, two system in Hong Kong.
It's very confused. Yeah, they use propaganda to completely wipe it out. Do you think, though, that this is the kind of about the interpretation of the law, right? So the way the PRC has interpreted it is that they have control over a state with 1.5 billion people, and 1.5 billion people to what's Hong Kong again, like 20 million, I forget, but it's less. It's not 1 billion people. So majority rules democracy, and isn't it kind of like that's why they promise democracy, because it's not self-determination?
It's not really a democracy in China. In China, there is a Congress, but that Congress have meeting only once a year. So imagine a 1.3 billion country has a Congress, and this Congress only have an annual meeting. And in this annual meeting, within 2 weeks, they have decided everything for the whole nation. And these so-called Congress members are not freely elected by Chinese people. They are chosen by the Communist Party, and then you can go for the election, and then you are elected because you are the only candidates. And then they form this Congress controlled by the CCP, and they decide everything for China. And the problem is that why we need one country, two system? Because Hong Kong has a different legal system. Hong Kong use British common law, while in China they use the civil code. Civil code and common law are two systems. They follow two different philosophical traditions. Because common law is more empirical, so it's more reliant on the case law, while Chinese law does not. That's why we need one country, two system to preserve our legal independence. However, the current proposed, actually approved national security law violate the common law tradition. Yes, the Hong Kong government say it is unrealistic to expect the national security law follow the common law tradition in Hong Kong because it is proposed by the Beijing government. So we must we must make some concession between common law and civil code. And actually, this clearly mean that there is no one country, two systems.
About a week and a half ago was the Tiananmen Square massacre reunion, and the Chinese government of PRC China had Zoom take down the family reunion service for the widows and the mothers of the people who had died. So it seems like there's a big thing about hiding information from people. Do you think that that's true? Do you think that there is censorship in mainland China? Do you think that that's is that like a big part of what China is? It's a censored state.
There are censorship, of course. The problem is that sometimes the censorship is not very obvious. For example, when Zoom shut down the memorial service, of course, it's a very obvious censorship. However, sometimes they have some soft censorship. For example, many Westerners or Hong Kong, Taiwanese businessmen have business time with Chinese enterprise. So if they want you to shut up, they will use business ties as a threat. Okay, if you say something offending us, I will cut all business with you. I will close your bank account. I will arrest your employees, etc. Doing these illegal things, and these are soft censorship because they then say, "Oh, you cannot say this." Oh, they will say, "Oh, of course you have freedom of speech, but you have to be responsible for what is happening. Not on yourself, but on your relatives or your employees or your company." And that's how soft censorship work in China.
So how does soft censorship affect the outcome of decision making? And I mean, if these people aren't voting anyway, do they need to know anything in order to make decisions? Like how does a pacified populace help the communist Chinese state?
For example, if you look at the newspaper and publishers in Hong Kong, most newspapers are very pro-China. But in the law, there is freedom of speech, freedom of press in Hong Kong. Why? The mainline media is so one-sided. Why they share fake news? Because they have business ties with China, and they know that if they offend Chinese government, they will be in trouble. That's how soft censorship manipulate the speech in Hong Kong.
Do you think the end result of the PRC will be like? Do you think that they're going to achieve their goal of like an entire ethno state, which just controls Asiatic peoples? Like, what is the goal really of the PRC?
They want to. Well, they want to sustain their tyranny by oppression. However, if we really we read Chinese history, many dynasties try the same policy, and gradually they collapsed. They were overthrown. But it doesn't mean that there will be a glorious future. It only means that there will be chaos after overthrow. And actually, early in ancient Confucianism, Confucius scholar warns the problem of oppression on peoples. If you don't allow people to speak out, sorry, there was a phone.
They're like, oh, you've told too much.
I know that's my clients. Okay, so I say in Guo Yu, ancient Confucian historical record, it was written that when the king Li of Zhou want to ban everyone from speaking backwards about him, a minister warned him that if you block people's mouth, it's just like you block a river channel. Gradually, flooding comes and war collapses. King Li does not listen to his minister. At the end, he was overthrown. He fled, and that's how that's the Chinese Confucian wisdom. And the Chinese Communist government never learned from history.
So, if Chinese philosophy is a big part of the building of China, does that make Confucianism bad and Lao Tzu was burned? Does that make Lao Tzu's Tao Te Ching good? Is it work that way, or does Confucianism have like merits to it?
China is a confusing concept because what you say, Confucianism contribute to the Chinese culture. You are talking about the ancient Chinese culture or the classical Chinese culture, but the modern China is another thing. Simply speaking, modern China is not a China. If you talk about classical China, modern China is based upon communism, Marxism, and gradually it is polluted by capitalism when the Japan opened the market. So now we have the largest bureaucratic capitalist country in the world. That's People's Republic of China. And Confucianism has little role, actually. Confucianism has little role to the contemporary China. They have little contribution to the law and political systems. For Taoism also, they have little role in the Chinese politics. The only heritage they have is legalism, Faism, Fajia. Legalism promotes tyranny, promotes strict laws governance, which echoes with communist policy. If anyone says something bad with the government, they oppress, they arrest them, so as to maintain security and stability of the state. That's Xi Jinping's policy. Xi Jinping is a legalist, and that's the only heritage that we can find in modern China. If you want to find Confucian heritage, you can only find in Hong Kong or in Taiwan, or maybe in Japan and South Korea, but not in modern China.
So modern China is this weird thing then. It's you've got 58 ethnic minorities that have been all but wiped out in one way or another, the Uyghurs, the Tartars, right? Like all of these groups. What if they keep trying to why do they want to destroy, why is it so important to the PRC to take Hong Kong and to take Taiwan and to take these places and to swallow them into themselves? Why do they need to do that to win?
Well, I'm not a politician or diplomat. I'm a philosopher, so I would say it's all about ideology. So which means it's about stupid reason, not really for economic benefits. Firstly, Taiwan and Hong Kong, they want to take them back is for the sake of so-called national dignity. So they think, Hong Kong was colonized by British government. It's a shame to the Chinese nation. So they have invented a subjectivity called Chinese nation. And they want to maintain the dignity and sovereignty of Chinese nation, so they have to form a strong leadership, and that's Chinese Communist Party. So CCP must be the leader of Chinese nation, so that Chinese nation will enjoy a glorious future, or the glorious Chinese regime, as Xi Jinping speak. However, Chinese nation is a fake concept. Chinese nation does not appear until 19th century, when the Manchurian Qing dynasty know that they need to have some modern concept of nation. Nation does not exist in Chinese language until 19th century, when English and French and German were introduced to China. So that's a problematic concept, because before there was no Chinese nation. There was Han, after Manchurian, Tibetan, and other Uyghurs, other so-called minorities, ethnic minorities. Ethnic minorities is another problematic concept, because it does not exist until PRC promotes this idea. In the past, they are simply foreigner. I should say Mongolian, Manchurian, Tibetan, Uyghurs, they are foreigners, because they are outside of the proper China borders. But when a modern state like China is established in 1911, the Republic of China, and then 1949, the People's Republic of China, they use a Western concept of nation to govern the big territory with different cultures, different languages, and different races. So they need to invent a concept to include everyone. So it's called Chinese nation. So suddenly Uyghurs become Chinese, Mongolian become Chinese, Manchurian become Chinese. Being Chinese, they have to share some so-called common features. And these common features is arbitrarily designed by the Chinese Communist Party. That's how the oppression starts. It must start because from the very beginning, Chinese nation is is a very oppressive concept. There is a big crowd concept here called Chinese nation, and you have to submit to this big nation by sacrificing your identities. That's how Chinese nationalism works.
So if China's like this today and it wasn't like that originally, how did China become this way? Like, where did it get these ideas, to become so tyrannical? Or is that somewhere along the way? Like, how did this happen?
You mean how nationalism was adopted by CCP and the Chinese people?
Yeah.
So there is a long story. Let me put them in short. In 19th century, when Manchurian Qing dynasty was invaded by imperialists, there was a strong anti-imperialist emotion, patriotic emotion. However, the problem is that there was no concept of nation. So they used the Western idea of nation. 19th century was a time when Europe was influenced by nationalism, particularly German nationalism and French nationalism. They have big impact on the Chinese scholars. Chinese scholars like Nan Tiqiao, Jiang Taiyan, they think they need to establish a Chinese nation to fight against the imperialists. That's why they come up with the idea of Chinese nation. And this become a very popular concept in 20th century China. Almost everyone were nationalists. Kuomintang were translated as nationalist party, which symbolized how nationalist they were. So they want to establish a modern state like China, which is modernized with strong military force to fight against the imperialist invasion. Even though nowadays China become the second largest economy in the world, anti-imperialism is still a slogan in mainland China. They still think, oh, China is still under threat by the imperialists. By imperialists, they means American and sometimes occasionally British. Even though Britain is so tiny, they still think, oh, that's a threat to big China. Why they still need an enemy called imperialists? Because they need an enemy to maintain the whole system. If there is no more imperialism, nationalism collapse. Nationalism presuppose otherness or enemies, as Anderson said in the imagined community. They need some enemies, some otherness. There is a threat to China. Okay, so we need a strong government to lead Chinese people to fight against the enemies. That's CCP. And why we need CCP to maintain Chinese nation? Because Chinese nation is something real. They must assume Chinese nation as something real. So if you challenge the existence of Chinese nation, you are doing blasphemy, because Chinese nation is their god. China is now an atheist country, so they have only artificial god called Chinese nation. Chinese nation become their religion. If you say something offend Chinese nation, you will be arrested. That's why they have strict national security law. You don't have these things in Britain or in France or in Germany, because they don't share the same faith. At the end, nationalism is very religious. That's why they actually force Hong Kongese to accept this religion of Chinese nationalism. However, Hong Kongese reject. That's how the conflict starts.
There's been a number of circumstances throughout Chinese history, especially in the 20th century with communism, looking at like the Cultural Revolution, the removal of all sorts of cultural icons, like iconoclasm. Do you think that, and has this happened, iconoclasm to Hong Kong by being conquered or traded back to PRC? Has that led to iconoclasm? And is that, is there more iconoclasm to come?
Well, they have to remove the cultural icons in Hong Kong if they want to take full control of Hong Kong, but it won't happen within 1 day or 2 days. It will be different from the Cultural Revolution. Cultural Revolution is very violent, very short term. So they just tore down temples and churches, burned books and statues, just like what we see now in American and in UK when people try to tear down Churchill statues. That is exactly Cultural Revolution. That is exactly communist ideas. And it can hardly happen in Hong Kong because Hong Kong is more traditionalist. The whole society is more traditionalist. You cannot do this suddenly, or else you will trigger big opposition. So they have to do it gradually. For example, change the language, the teaching language at school, from Cantonese to Mandarin. So gradually you lost your cultural heritage, or change the Chinese textbook. So they teach less classical Chinese, but more modern Chinese. Of course, I mean communist literature. They change it from education, and gradually in religion, they put stronger control on religion. Actually, although in the media you see many Christian churches support the protesters on the street. Actually, the mainline church in Hong Kong are quite pro-China. What you can see on the screen are not mainline church. They are some church leaders, but they do not represent the denomination. Most churches are controlled by China. So does the temples, the Buddhism, the Taoism, they are all controlled by China. So gradually, by manipulation, the cultural heritage will be removed, but it takes a long process.
Well, I think my main concerns have been kind of addressed on the political side. We could get to the philosophy soon, but I guess, okay, there is one last thought. I just can't help myself. We're about halfway into the thing, but I wanted to. The last question about politics I wanted to ask was: what do you think of Taiwan as a Hong Kong citizen? Do you think of Taiwan as a friend? Do you think that it could someday save you? Do you think you guys could work closer together and disassociate from the PRC eventually?
Well, there is a strong tie between Taiwan and Hong Kong. However, the relationship is quite tricky. Sincerely speaking, the worse Hong Kong society is, the better Taiwan will be. Because, firstly, the Minjin Party, Minjin benefits from the Hong Kong humanitarian crisis. Because, you see, Hong Kong, one country, two system fails. That's why there will be more Taiwanese who support Taiwan independence rather than unification with China. That's very straightforward. Secondly, Taiwan actually is how do you say, from economic perspective, it has to compete with Hong Kong. In the past, it cannot, because Hong Kong was a financial hub. Hong Kong was an international financial center with skilled labor, speaking good English, and now these people flee from Hong Kong. So when Hong Kong lost its advantages as a financial hub, Taiwan may be a new candidate. That's why, yes, Hong Kong and Taiwan has a strong ties, but the decline of Hong Kong means the rise of Taiwan. That's very straightforward. However, it doesn't mean that we cannot cooperate, because Taiwan need Hong Kongese to build up their economy, to build up their society from the recovery from the pandemic, especially for economy. If they want to establish a new financial hub in Taipei, they need skilled laborers from Hong Kong. That's why Taiwan should accept Hong Kong immigrants to move to Taiwan to build their society.
Yeah, I totally agree. I can't wait to see that happen. I know right now the United States and several countries are starting to shift towards Taiwan, and our relationships are improving. I think that international acceptance of Taiwan will mean domestic acceptance of Hong Kong. I think that's essential. But all right, thank you for putting up with all the political stuff. I'm sorry, I know you come on as a philosopher, and I have to ask you about the news. But I'd like you to introduce a little bit about why you know so many things, who you are, and where you got your education. What did you study? You said philosophy. Like, what's up with you?
Well, I am a PhD in theology and religious studies at the University of Glasgow. So my academic background is more on the Kierkegaard, Christian philosophy, and Confucianism, Neo-Confucianism. My research interests focus on the Chinese modernization, philosophy of culture, and the comparative philosophy. That's why it is related to the contemporary politics and social affairs in Hong Kong and Taiwan, because Hong Kong actually experienced the history of Chinese modernization in the 19th century. That's why I'm interested in this topic. I do research on Confucianism and Christianity. And going back to what I have mentioned, the problem is that China destroyed the Chinese cultural heritage while they are preserved in Hong Kong. That's why we have to minimize the communist damage on Hong Kong culture. If we allow Hong Kong culture to be demolished by the Chinese government, it does not only mean that we lost Hong Kong, but it means that we lost the classical Chinese culture heritage. We lost the classical Chinese philosophy.
And so it's gone like completely, or like it's just for them it's gone, or like how much of it's gone?
it means that if Hong Kong is gone, it means that the classical Chinese culture is unrooted. It only exists in a scholarly setting, in the academic settings, but it's unrooted from the real society.
So you're trying to keep your roots into the culture, and yet you've also found yourself attached to Christianity, which is very interesting. What about Christianity do you think conflicts or connects or correlates with Confucianism?
Because there are two things. First, for the theoretical perspective and the practical perspective. Let me begin with the practical perspective. Unlike Taiwan, Hong Kong is a mixture of Chinese and Western culture. And when we talk about Western culture, it means Christian civilization, because a Christian missionary has a strong influence in Hong Kong development during since 19th century. That's why there is a mixture of Confucian and Christian culture in Hong Kong. So by preserving Hong Kong culture, of course, it means that you preserve not only Confucian heritage but also Christian heritage, and they are mixed together in Hong Kong. So, from a theoretical perspective, what Christianity can contribute to the Chinese culture and the Confucianism is the idea of transcendence. There is a lack of transcendence in Chinese Confucianism, because Confucianism focuses too much on the human nature, how we manifest the natural moral goodness from individual perspective. However, it fails in history. You can see so many assholes in Chinese history, which means that the moral goodness is not manifested in Chinese history at all. Why? Because they overestimate the moral goodness of human nature, but ignore the moral evil in human nature. And Christianity, by introducing the concept of sin and transcendence God, they can address this issue. And from Confucian perspective, Confucianism can also contribute to the Western Christianity, because for a long time, Western Christianity are too, what do you say? They focus.
Is your computer okay? I'm hearing some glitches. I'm not sure if there's...
yeah, it's probably stable. So can you hear now?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay. Confucianism can contribute to Christianity because Confucianism focused on moral autonomy. Moral autonomy for a long time is lost in Christianity, because Christianity focused too much on moral heteronomy. They rules an external God. Okay, you will just be obedient to God, fully submit to God, and that's all. That's all. However, Confucianism restore the importance of subjectivity. You need to manifest your will from your individual perspective. That's something lacked in Christian history until modern age, when Kierkegaard re-emphasizes the importance of subjectivity. So Confucianism contributes subjectivity to Christianity, while Christianity contributes transcendence to Confucianism. Two systems are contributing to each other if they are integrated.
What about Taoism? How do you feel about Taoism?
Taoism, I have bias on Taoism, but
yeah, exactly.
Taoism is simply against the idea of modernization. If you want to modernize the East Asian culture, you need to have some progressive or practical philosophy, which aims social progress. Confucianism and legalism, they want to achieve social progression. They want to change the society, bring social good to the society. However, Taoism is simply against the concept of development. They are against social development. From Chinese historian perspective, Taoism prevailed only during social decline. Of course, that's because historical records are mostly written by Confucian scholars in the past. But actually, it makes sense. When you look at like Wei Jin dynasties, when Taoism prevailed, it was a time when there were so many wars and chaos in the society, and people were disappointed. So they think Confucianism failed to maintain the social harmony, and then they become very individualistic. They retreat back to the countryside, and then they love Taoism. There is a social sentence. That's why Taoism was popular during those days. In the time of development or progression, Taoism has to grow. So
I think your computer is glitching again.
Okay, sorry, because the network is a bit slow. What I mean is that Taoism cannot contribute to the modernization. Can you hear?
Almost. I heard for a second there.
The Taoism cannot contribute to modernization and development because Taoism discourage development. They encourage the restore of natural life or ancient living, whatever. They are against development.
You might want to try clicking on settings, camera, and then lowering the resolution, because if the signal's not going through very well. But I think they're probably it's probably just the internet matrix doesn't like you talking about Taoism like that. But it makes sense because Taoism does kind of forbid culture from developing, and you're supposed to just follow a natural path. But can that happen if you follow nature? Do you think there's any, is that necessarily untrue? Like that if you live in, what are the negative consequences of Taoism? Why didn't it work before?
It's because simply speaking, Taoism is not a philosophy of governance. So talk about social development of our nation, you need a philosophy of governance, which means it bring the society social progress. Like Confucianism, Confucian goal of development is the manifestation of moral goodness. Everyone become sages. Everyone becomes so moral. That's their prospect. For Christianity, the prospect is universal love. Everyone are saved by God's grace and live in neighbor love. Everyone live each other as neighbors. That's their social goal. In Taoism, their goal is, if you look at Johnson, it's very individualistic. It's very subjective. It's about his own freedom, his own enjoyment. You can hardly bring social prospect to the whole society if you embrace Taoism. That's why when Taoism prevailed in Chinese history, it was the time either when the social society was.
Well, while he's frozen for a second, check out my jade
Hello?
You froze for a second, so I thought I would amuse people by showing my jade statue.
Okay.
Of Confucius.
Yes.
Pretty cool, right? Pretty decent, I think. Okay, so maybe do me a favor and try to turn the settings down. If you go to the
I turned it already.
Oh yeah?
Definition already.
Okay, we'll try again. I think it's pretty good. A lot of people understood you. Someone said glitchy but coherent and brilliant. So it's a good description.
I hope they understand my Hong Kong accent.
Well, actually, we deal with a lot of accents, and you're very clear. As far as I think my viewers can hear you and understand you.
Every time I was struggling when HD search YouTube video. What is he talking about? His accent is so difficult to understand.
Yeah, no, I think it's only when the matrix happens, like when literally, hold on, let me do the thing. When it goes like this and it's all like like that's all that people don't understand. Otherwise, it's fine. Wait, what have I done?
You have turned off. Okay, your camera is on.
Okay, I was like, what? All right, so maybe that'll help too. Also, if the sound is better at some point, I'll tell you if you're glitching again. For now, it looks like it's working again. So, okay, so back to the questions. You're saying that it's instead of it being a top-down system where the government is authority, it's actually a bottom-up system where the people have an internal idea, internal ideology. Is that more or less the difference? It's like Taoism is like a outwards thing than a control mechanism. Is that what you're saying?
You can say Taoism is more individualistic, but they are not bottom up. Bottom up approach is more Confucianism. If you use the Manchu's tradition, because Manchu says when you fully manifest your moral goodness, you will be a sage. You will be a sage king, so you can convert to idealists. But at least it means that the individual moral life is related to the social life. So it's bottom up from your individual level to the whole social level. That's very confusion. It's very Manchus idea. For Taoism, they don't have this step. When you are free, okay, you are a real person, genuine in Zhuangzi's terminology. That's free. And how about others? I don't care. I'm free. That's all. So it's just bottom, no bottom up.
So okay. So what is the answer then, in your opinion, in terms of the right answer? Should there be this? You think religion and Confucianism and control over people, which is kind of like philosophy, legalism. Do you prefer that to the idea of individuals making their own destinies for themselves?
What do you mean by controlling people?
Wait, what?
You mean you said Confucianism control people? What you mean?
It seems like, and tell me if maybe I'm missing the idea, but is it like Confucianism has an order or a caste place in society that you fulfill a role in a larger society? Is that not a good? Maybe you should explain Confucianism, not me.
Well, there are at least two ideas of classes in Confucianism. In Zhuangzi perspective, it was on what you mean. Everyone has its own role in society. They must strictly follow their roles to fulfill the ritual law system, the ritual systems. If someone does not fulfill his chaos to the whole society, so this is not allowed. That's why Zhuangzi represent a more autocratic tradition in Confucianism. That's one tradition. Actually, Confucius follow similar tradition because Confucius talks about social role also. A monarch should act as a monarch, a minister should act as a minister. But Manchus does not share the same idea of class. Class system in Manchus' idea is changeable. When a king, for example, when a king lost his legitimacy to rule, one can overthrow the king. A sage who is not in power can overthrow the king when the king becomes immoral. That's why class system is not fixed in Manchus tradition. There is social mobility from the lower class to the upper class. Of course, there is still class. Social structures contains class system, but in Manchus tradition, there is social mobility. That's why you can see history. People can become a nobleman or minister by education, even though he was just a son of peasants. because there was an imperial examination system, and this system was not in the UK. A system was not found in the Europe until I think 18th century when Fortier introduced the examination system to the French government.
Excellent. I think that actually, if we try with the camera off for a second, it might actually be better because I'm having a hard time getting some of the words in between. But somebody gave a good donation, so clearly they're eager to hear more of this. So here's what I'm and thank you very much, Hal, Julia, for doing that. That's really rad. So let me see. Like, if you were to try to put Christianity into a modern place in China, then where does Christianity then help China and then the world? Why is it so relevant if it's if you already have this like legal system?
I'm sorry. What?
Hold on. By the way, don't turn off your camera because it looks like the internet's back.
I didn't.
Yeah, it's working fine. So,
what was your question? You mean a Confucian reform of legal system?
Yeah, so if Confucianism has taken like, okay, so in the West, we have the Talmudic law has really influenced a lot of the law, even in Arabic law, in Islamic law, and Christian law. It seems like Confucianism is influenced by legal, like you were saying. It's like the one thing that is. What evidence do we have of legal, by the way, and like how does legal play into modern culture and politics?
Well, there are two things. Of course, Confucian laws had a strong influence in Chinese law in the past. That's a fact. Whether we appreciate it is another thing. Well, although I argue that we need to preserve Confucian legacy, I am against the use of Confucian laws in modern society because it doesn't make sense. So there is some selection when you modernize a culture. Something you must preserve, while others must be rejected. So let me begins with the Confucian law first. Confucian laws, 礼教, ritual governance, means that ritual are written down as law code. How you live daily is written down in the law. For example, how you treat your father or your mother. If you upset your father or your mother, you will be arrested. In ancient society, you will be prosecuted as, oh, you are not practicing filial piety because you made your father and mother upset, and you will be sentenced. It was terrible. And this problem was criticized by Hegel in 19th century because Hegel said, how can you use external law to govern people's individual life, family life? That's his internal things. As his family matter, you cannot give this power to the government, at least to the dictatorship. That's the problem of Confucian ritual law. That's why in modern age, we don't need Confucian ritual law in our legal system. What we should preserve is the Confucian moral teaching, but they should not be put in the code. Imagine if the constitution writes that, oh, if you don't practice filial piety, if you don't love your father and your mother, you'll be sentenced to death. That's terrible because it's violating human rights. So that's why we need modernization, not restoration. If I say, oh, we restore everything Confucian text writes, that's not modernization. That's traditionalist restoration. That's a conservative. That's why I hate people calling me as conservative. No, I'm not conservative. If I'm conservative, I will force everyone to restore the ritual law, and then from then on, if you don't practice filial piety to your parents, you will be put to death. That doesn't make sense in a modern society. That's violate human rights. That's why we need to be careful when it comes to tradition. What's the tradition we should preserve? What is the tradition that we should reject? I cannot see this careful selection in the West when it comes to Christianity or other Western tradition. They are either denying everything or preserving everything. That's why you have far right and far left in the West.
So, by the way, everyone watching, if you have any questions you want to ask Master Andrew, like please start to like send them down, and we'll ask. One of the questions was the Order of the Dark Shard says communism sucks. It's not really a question, no question about it. I agree, but what do you feel about communism? Like, is communism? Is there a place for it, or socialism, or any of that stuff, or what's the real fundamental issues with it for you?
The problem of communism is that at abstract from the real situation, the existential situation, communism is based upon the class struggle. Class struggle, it means that there will always be clashes between different social classes. For example, workers are oppressed by the capitalists, the businessmen, right? So the workers will revolt and then overthrow the businessman class, and then they will get into power. That's very idealistic, very theoretical. But in real life, we don't just have an identity called class. You can be a worker at the same time as a father of a family, as a churchgoer of a church. You have so many identity, and Marxism, communism simplify everything. That's the problem of Marxism and communism. They do not address the real situation of individual life. They abstract individual into the concept called class. That's why it won't work in anywhere in the world. Never work. It never works. It's worse than capitalism. That's why it go back to my attack to CSH. CSH think, oh, capitalism is a big problem. So we have to find a solution. We have to overthrow capitalism. Okay, yes, capitalism sucks. Everyone agrees. However, what is the future after capitalism? Marxism? Marxism fails. So we know, okay, the current system fails, but we don't have a substitute. That's a problem. And if we don't have a substitute, and then you say, oh, because the current system sucks, we overthrow it, we destroy everything, we have nothing at the end. And that's more horrifying.
What about artificial intelligence, technocracy, automation? Any hope? What's that about?
It brings new hope for the tyranny, because AI decrease the cost of manipulation. I think in 1970s, Foucault has a lecture in Paris talking about the biopolitics, and he say he was very optimistic. He say, oh, the neoliberalism means that the society is getting more liberal because the government realized that the cost of manipulation is very high. So they just allow people to decide themselves freely. Foucault is wrong, because AI decrease the cost of manipulation. For example, in Macau, I cannot go out if I don't install the apps recording my temperature or other details. I need to show the apps to the security guy, so proving that I am not affected by the virus. So they use an app to manipulate your daily life. AI reduce the cost. In the past, you need to fill in the form. You need to do so many paperwork. There was a high administrative cost to manipulate your daily life. Now, an apps reduce the cost. That's how Chinese tyranny works. If you look at China nowadays, they don't use cash. They use WeChat to pay. They use phone apps to pay. And then your money flow is all manipulated by the government, because all are digital. The cost is so low because AI control everything. That's why AI is a threat to human freedom, I have to say.
Interesting idea. So do you think that humans with increased technology, like a neural lace, like Elon Musk is talking about, is that the cure to artificial intelligence? Is it just better superhuman intelligence? Is that a solution or a threat?
You mean super AI? You mean that
like
AI...
if we have the brain thing in the back of the head, so all of a sudden humans are as smart as computers, you know, is that going to make AI useless? You know, are we going to beat AI and that's going to help us if we become AI, basically, like if we change ourselves, transhumanism?
That's really a horrifying idea. If you install an AI in your brain, are you still a human being?
No, you're not. I think the answer is you're not. Like before we even go down that route, a human is a thing without AI in it. I think that's the definition. Like at a certain point, once that happens, I think you're transhuman. But what transhumanism is going to be and how close that will be to humans, that's the question. And I think the biggest scare is, well, you might be able to program people to not have oppositional thoughts, you know?
That's a point. It will make manipulation easier. As I have said, AI reduce the cost of manipulation. If you everyone install an AI in your brain, and then your thought can be controlled by an app or software. And another thing is that the definition of human will be challenged. So from then on, do you still have free will? Can you still make choice on your own, or is your choice determined by machine? That's why, in this sense, I'm against AI. I'm against this change. It doesn't mean that I'm conservative. It means that because changes are not always good. Obama always say, "Oh, change." That's nonsense. That's bullshit. Because there's no prospect. There's no clear prospect. I mean, you have to calculate the cost and benefit whenever you talk about change. Oh, okay, I want to do a social reform, a technical reform. What's the benefit? What is the cost? If the cost is bigger than the benefit, and then you should say no. You don't be a change lover. Change is not always good. That's the problem of the current Western society. They always embrace change. Oh, change must be good. No, change can be bad. Change can be terrible. Like AI, like the radical denial of the history. These are bad change.
So in a way, the PRC is conservative in the sense that they're trying to conserve what they have, right? In that way.
They try to preserve the power they have. However, on the other hand, they are quite progressive because they are leading in the research on what is called digital money. The digital exchange, they are leading the world, because in Beijing you cannot use cash at all. In Shanghai, Beijing, they use digital money. They have some technology leading the world, but it doesn't mean that they have a liberal society. So I am leaving soon. Do you still have a
that was a pretty good one. You left me with a powerful thought. Preservatives. Those are is a whole other kind of thing than conservative is being preservative, like a preservative. Yes. Well, does anyone else have any questions? I think that's pretty good, man. I think this was one of my. I really appreciate it. This is one of the greatest APM kind of talks that we've done so far. I hope you come back. It was fun bouncing ideas off you. And also, can you give us a little information about where they can find more, your website and your Discord and things? I'll put the links, of course, underneath this for later.
Well, I'm more active on Facebook, so you can click my Facebook page called Master Andrew Tam, and I've got also a YouTube channel called Andrew Tam. So you can follow my YouTube and my Facebook page. And if you want to join my Facebook group, you can click the link in my Facebook page. And most posts are in Chinese, but I'm trying to write more English posts because recently I got more English speaking followers. So I write more English article and posts.
Very cool. I'm very grateful that you came here, and I hope people get the time to check this out. And this will be on the APM, so we'll share this and come back soon. Thanks a lot.
Okay, thank you. We'll see you later. Bye.